The book is for parents of kids ages 8 to 18, sort of middle, high school, late elementary school. And then I culled those down, and I ended up with 30 families from that large group who are in the book in one form or another. 8 of them are representative of these archetypes, which were kind of the most common failure experiences that were coming up over and over again for this age group. So I'm going to walk you through what it is. The rebel. The rebel archetype is the kid who fails to follow the rules. And that might come up in a variety of ways. Maybe your kid refuses to come home in time for curfew, right? Over and over again. Or maybe it's smaller, but really activating. You might have a household rule, like we take our shoes off when we come in the front door, and they're constantly leaving their shoes on and questioning it. Why? Why do we have to do that? I don't feel like doing that, right? So failure to follow the rules, that's the rebel. The daredevil shows a failure to take care of their body, and again, that can be a really wide range of experiences. So that can be the kid who won't put on a helmet or they skateboard, or it could be the kid who's experimenting with substances, like binge drinking or vaping, whatever it could be. The misfit is really the academic misfit, so that's a kid who's failing to perform at school in the way that parents and teachers expect. So they're often mislabeled, they're confusing to adults, like, why don't you try harder? Are you being lazy? What's going on here? But it's a feeling that they aren't performing to other people's expectations, which gives them a feeling of being a misfit or a failure, as we say. The ego. The ego has a failure to show concern for others, and that will be every kid. Basically, at some point, it is their job to become pretty self-centered. And again, they're working on that identity piece. They're trying to figure out who they are. So they are really focused on themselves. Sometimes that sort of crosses a boundary to where it goes from being annoying to feeling really problematic to the sort of happiness and harmony in the home. So that's the ego. The loner has a failure to connect with their peers, really struggling to find connection and belonging among their age group or similar age groups. The sensitive one is a kid who has a failure to handle their feelings, so they are overwhelmed, often highly anxious, maybe just really having trouble coping with the breadth and size of their emotions. The black sheep has a failure to connect with their family, so similar to the loner. What I noticed with the loner is that most of those kids who were having a failure to connect with their peers were getting along well with their family. They were often using their parents as friendships or family members as friendships, but were struggling when they didn't have family around. The black sheep is sort of the opposite of that. These kids don't feel like they fit in their family, but they might have a really strong peer group at school, but for a variety of reasons, conflict of values, lots of fighting, just even something as simple as everybody has the same interest but me, they feel like they don't fit with their family. And then the bench warmer. The bench warmer shows a failure to believe in themselves. So this is a kid who just says, you guys play, I'll sit here and watch, I'm not really that good. They're not a joiner. They don't have a lot of confidence that they can do things well. They don't try. So that's the bench warmer. So in the book, we've got the first 5 chapters, which kind of bring you up to speed on failure. And by the way, these failures are often, hopefully, temporary, as are these archetypes. Each of the next 8 chapters is dedicated to one of these and tells you the story of a family who went through an experience with one of these archetypes, the rebel, the loner, the black sheep, and how they got through that so that they could grow from that experience instead of getting stuck there. These are not meant to be typecast. And I don't expect that any child would be one of these for a very long time. Hopefully, that's our job to sort of coax them into new experiences. And you may look at this and go, okay, I have one kid who is 3 of those, and one kid who used to be one of those and is now something else. You might look at this and wonder what you were. It would be interesting to reflect on that. I can tell you, I was the sensitive one and the rebel at the same time. Okay, I'm actually going to go one. This is weird. Okay, well this slide didn't transfer when we put it on this computer. I have no idea why. Doesn't matter. It's a picture of a person going like this with a really loud noise behind them. What I want you to do is I want you to imagine, I'm going to describe some studies. Actually, I'm going to describe one study that is based on a breadth of work by a psychologist named Marty Seligman, who did about 5 decades worth of work into the concept of how we handle pain and discomfort and helplessness. And of all the studies he did, I'm going to talk to you about one involving really loud noise. So he took college students and he put them into 3 groups. And the first group, he put in a room, one at a time in a room, and exposed them to ear-piercing noise. And there was a button in front of them. And if they pressed that button 4 times, the noise would stop. In the second group, one at a time, he put someone in a room with the ear-piercing noise. They also had a button, but the button was disabled. So they could press the button as much as they wanted, and they would still hear the noise no matter what. And then in the third group, they were put in a room, and it was quiet, and there was no button. They just stood there until they were let out. So that was the first part of the study. The people in the first group learned pretty quickly how to stop the noise. People in the second group were not able to stop the noise. People in the third group were not exposed to the noise. Then he took those same groups and he put them in another room and he filtered in the awful noise. The first group did not have a button this time. They had a lever that they could swipe from side to side. Instantly. The people who figured out how to press the button swiped that lever and stopped that noise. They did not remain exposed to it for long. The second group, they were in the room where the button was disabled, and so there was nothing they could do to stop the noise. When they were put into a different room with a different deactivator, they didn't try. They just waited. They were like, well, the last one didn't work, so I guess this is just how it is. I will sit here and suffer, hunker down, and figure out how to just deal with that noise and try to turn my brain off for a while. The third group, who was not exposed to any noise or any way to get out of it, in this experiment, they were mostly successful at figuring out to reach forward and swipe the lever from side to side. But over his decades of work, lots of Seligman subjects who were in the third group did what this second group did and just gave up because they did not have the experience of figuring out that if I do something, it can stop the pain or the discomfort, right? What this teaches us, this whole body of work teaches us, is that mostly our default to pain and discomfort as humans is helplessness. It's to give up, unless we are exposed to a situation where we figure out pretty quickly how to stop that pain or discomfort. When that happens, we can translate that concept into lots of other situations. We can say, okay, now I'm in a different situation. Before I went through a friendship breakup, and that was so painful, but I figured out how to cope with that, and now I'm in a romantic breakup. And yes, it's devastating, but my brain can recall that I've gotten through this before, and I can make the steps that I need to make to get through this again. But people who do not experience the possibility of learning how to cope really suffer and really struggle with their pain tolerance. So, going back to this previous slide, if I were to tell you when you first had your child, when your child first arrived into your family, if I said to you, you get to choose a box right now that your child will live their life in, and if you choose the easy box, they are going to be a joy. They are going to make so many friends at school and be loved by their teachers. They're going to get great grades. They will get onto every team or into every play or activity that they try out for. They will have a lovely relationship in high school. It'll be so sweet, and they will have an amicable breakup, and then get into the first college of their choice. That's the easy box. The second box, your kid is going to be sometimes a joy and sometimes a terror. Your child is going to make choices that really scare you sometimes. Your child is going to have friends who don't like them from time to time and really hurt them. Your child is going to have their heart broken, and your child is going to do really well in some classes and pretty okay in others and terribly in a couple. your child will get into the third or fourth college of their choice. And then the last box, I don't need to describe to you, a traumatic life, but that will be one in which pain is inflicted. It's not just choices that they make or circumstances that happen, but things decisions are made in poor decisions for their health and well-being. Okay, so if I said to you, you can choose one of these for your kiddo, for your new kiddo. Most of you would say easy. Easy sounds great. That sounds charmed. I would love the easy life for my kid. It sounds so good. But what happens if we choose the easy life is that once your kid is 18 and they're out of your house and they have their first bump in the road, assuming you could even clear the path of all the bumps, assuming you could snowplow or helicopter your way through their life to keep it as easy as possible, by the time they left your house, or at the time that they left your house, they would not know how to press that button 4 times the first time something painful happened to them. And they would probably come right back home and say, let me just stay here forever, right? So the easy life sounds good at first, but it does not pay off down the road. The uncomfortable life is the one in which our kids are exposed to enough discomfort that they learn how to get comfortable with it. And when they hit a bump in the road, they know, oh, I bounce. I know I've been through something like this before. I know what to do. Maybe last time I pressed the button, and maybe this time I have to climb over a wall. Or maybe this time I have to set up a bridge. Or maybe this time I have to do whatever. But they know that. And so we want to give our kids lots of experiences where they get the opportunity to figure this out. Another way of putting this, I mentioned snowplow parenting, helicopter parenting, and there are lots of names for different styles of parenting that you can do with your kids. I'm inventing a new one, and I'm calling it greenhouse parenting. And this is why. Greenhouse keepers keep perfect environments for little tiny plants to grow. Everything is ideal. The temperature, the humidity, I mean, those little plants are thriving in that greenhouse by design. Nothing ever bothers them. It's the easy box, it's perfect. But they know that if they take their fully grown plants and transfer them out into the land after they've grown up in the greenhouse, those plants will die. They will not be able to tolerate the circumstances. So they do something called hardening off the plants, where they take the plants incrementally outside into the freezing cold weather and expose them and watch them start to shrivel a little bit, and then they bring them back into the warmth and comfort of the greenhouse. That process of allowing the plants to toughen up over a long period of time makes them ready when it's time to be planted outside. So at this point, parents often say, do I have to make it harder? Then do I need to be putting my kid out in the freezing cold for 20 minutes a day this winter to make sure that they can handle it when they don't get into their first choice college? The answer is no. You don't have to do anything to make life harder for your kids. Life is going to do that quite naturally. Friends are going to do that, colleges are going to do that, romantic partners are going to do that. The world is tough. You just have to be the greenhouse, and you have to let them go outside of the greenhouse. You have to give them enough freedom and independence that they can be out there and experience what life has to offer, uncomfortable as it may be, and then come home to your nurturing and safe house and create an environment that is so comfortable that they can tell you about it. Because really, I think that's our job as parents, to keep the door open. What we want is for our kids to tell us when they're suffering, right? That's the main thing we want. That's what we're always asking them. Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you feeling good? Because we're so desperate to know. And we just need to make an environment in which we say, you are free to go feel the world as it is, and this will always be a safe place for you to come and talk about it. Okay. So I want to talk specifically about these difficult situations that kids can go through and how I came to be so interested in it. And I came to the concept of failure really through the side door. When I went to my publisher with my idea for a third book, I said, I want to do rites of passage. I'm so fascinated in how different communities, different cultures, across time and across geography and across socioeconomic backgrounds, how have they handled rites of passage for kids in their community? How do we usher kids from childhood into adulthood? And what does that look like as sort of a universal truth among lots of people across the earth? And she was like, that's kind of academic and possibly boring. And but I would not give it up. I held onto that thread because I find it super exciting. And luckily, when I kept researching it, and when I did, I found a piece of the puzzle that I think we're missing as a society that I think is crucial. So coming of age looks typically like a rite of passage, as in a rite, a ceremony of some sort. And for us, it may be a ceremony, it may be a big party with a DJ and a candy bar, or whatever, candy buffet. Or it may be something that we say is sort of age-related, and you get an incremental increase in some kind of freedom or freedom or independence. So when you're 13, we say, okay, now you can have whatever, insert name of app that they want right now, or a phone. Or when you're 16, here are the keys to a car that you can drive around. And so we kind of have gotten to a point where we treat our rites of passage as conferring of some amount of freedom, and possibly a celebration too. That's fine, and I like those things. I think they're great. I do not think they help a kid become an adult particularly well. I think they're useful for adults. It's helpful to be an adult who can drive a car, but I don't think that experience in and of itself is what helps you be an adult. So I'm really interested in the work of Arnold van Gennep. He's a French ethnographer from the early 1900s who first coined the term rites of passage. And he studied children all over the world, and he looked at what it took for them to actually become an adult. And this is the pattern that he found in really all over. I think it's just about universal. The first step, a child needs to separate from their group. That's a little bit like individuation, which we were talking about before, but quite literally it means being away from their parents, or away from their peers, away from the community in which they are growing up in some way. The second step is they go through a time of being tested. They face a challenge of some sort because they're alone. And then they learn something important about themselves. They usually screw up royally as they are experiencing this new challenge. They learn from that, and then they become a better person. They reintegrate with their community. It's better for the kid. It's better for the community because now they have a community member who knows more about themselves and is more of an adult than they were before. We know this, we understand this. You may have studied this in college yourself, or if you didn't, you understand this culturally. You know this through entertainment. All of our favorite stories follow a rite of passage that Van Gennep first identified. A young person separates from their community. They go through a time of really being tested. They learn, they screw up in some way. They learn a valuable lesson from that, and they bring that lesson back to the community, a better version of themselves. They make their community better for what they learned. So we get this at this level, at kind of the Hollywood level. And you may get it at an academic level. Maybe you've read these books, or you've studied some of this yourself in psychology, or in anthropology class, or even a religion class. So you may be familiar with this concept there. Where we do not understand this very well is in our homes. So we're real cool with it intellectually, but we're sort of like, that's good for you, but I'm not really great with my kid having an experience where they have to go away from me and do something and mess up and learn from it. That feels real bad. There is a parenting author who, he's all but retired now, but he's written a lot of really iconic books, Michael Thompson. And you may have read some of his stuff, Raising Cain. It's maybe his most famous book, but anyway. He did a really interesting poll where he asked an auditorium full of adults, when did you learn, I want you to think about the time that you learned something really important about yourself. Think about that when you were a young person. And so they thought about it, and then he said, okay, now think back to that again. Were your parents there? And 90% of the people said their parents were not there when they learned something memorable and valuable about themselves as a person. So that fits right into this concept of the rite of passage. We're just really uncomfortable with it I'm going to tell you about my rite of passage story, as I can best remember. I may have had several. This is the one that stands out for me most of all. This is how the turkeys got me down. One year when I went to a program called the Mountain School. Do you guys know what the Mountain School is? I don't know if your school participates. I went to a private school in the Northeast, and there was a school in Vershire, Vermont. I was in school in Boston, Massachusetts. But there was a school in Vershire, Vermont that kids from private schools could apply to go to for a semester. This would have been the 80s. And you work on the farm, and you take care of your animals, and you raise your own food to eat, and you camp, and you learn a lot about nature. And it's academically very rigorous, so you go to school 6 days a week, and you study Thoreau, and you read Walden, and you do all the other stuff you have to do, math and French, and blah, blah, blah. So it's really hard and it's rigorous. And I applied to go, and I was a total city slicker, and I got accepted, and I got there. And so in addition to school 6 days a week, and then it cuts out a little early, that's why you go 6 days, farm work all afternoon, you were given chores to help the farm operate. So those were on 2-week rotations, and that could be anything from you have to clean the dishes after dinner, to you're on bathroom duty, you're scrubbing toilets, you're helping mend this fence, or, whatever it might be. So I had a variety of chores while I was there, and for one 2-week rotation, I was on turkey duty. And what that meant is that I had to wake up early by myself in Vermont before the sun came up, throw on a big coat, go outside, walk up Turkey Hill, get a big bucket, fill it with grain, and scatter it all over the ground to feed the turkeys. So for a week, I did that. And then at about the 2nd week mark, I was very cold one morning, and very tired one morning, and very 16 years old. And I was in my bed, and I thought, I'm just going to sleep in today. I just have to sleep in today. I can't do it today. So I slept in. I didn't feed the turkeys. And I went to school, and then I did my farm experience afterwards, and no one said anything. I was like, I got away with it. No one noticed. I got away with it. And so I went to bed that night, fully intending to resume my chores the next day. But the next morning, I was very tired and very cold again. I was still 16. And I decided that I could probably get away with it one more day. And so I didn't feed them that morning either. And I went to my classes, and I did my afternoon farm experience, and I went to bed. And I was like, I think they're lying to me about how much turkeys need to eat. Like, I really feel like I could keep doing this probably. The next morning, I did not get an opportunity to see if I would sleep in or not. The door to my dorm just slammed open. The manager of the farm came in and started shouting my name, shouting for me to come out. So I stumbled out into the bright hallway, and I was like, oh God. All the other kids in my dorm heard him, came out into the foyer, so we're all standing there, like, what's going on? And the farm manager was screaming, who do you think you are? I cannot believe you haven't been getting up and feeding the turkeys. I mean, really, everyone here is pulling their weight, and you think you could just skip your responsibilities, and he's yelling this at me, and keeps saying, who do you think you are? And I've never known less who I thought I was. I was just so ashamed, and I felt like I wanted the earth to swallow me up, or maybe I should just leave the mountain school entirely. It was humiliating. And he said, do you know what happens when turkeys don't eat? And I said, no, I don't know. And he said, they become cannibalistic. And I was like, what have I done? I am the worst person in the world. Now, to put you at ease a little bit, it was not a full-on Donna party, but they did begin to get interested in this idea. They had to. So I was just mortified. The next morning, I got up and I fed those turkeys. And I fed the turkeys for the rest of the time that I was on turkey duty, of course. I dug my heels in. I was still mortified, but I performed well. I did what I was supposed to do. A couple things helped me not quit the mountain school and not get stuck in that shame spiral. One is, it was a busy life. Farm life is a busy life. And so people couldn't dwell. All of the girls who came out of their rooms to watch me get yelled at, they didn't have to like gossip about it and sit around and talk about it. They were off doing their work. So they were busy. That was helpful. I think the most important thing that happened is the farm manager never brought it up again. And he so easily, when I switched chores, I don't know what my next chore was, but when I switched, he so easily could have been like, now Michelle, am I gonna have to check up on you? You're gonna do this, aren't you? I don't wanna have a situation where I find out you're sleeping in again. He presumed I was going to do my chores, and I did. I did them. Had he not presumed that, I think I would have started to believe something really different about myself at that moment. But I felt like, okay, I totally screwed up, and now I'm back on track. I can do the thing I'm supposed to do. And the third thing that helped was I went back to my school at the end of September, where no one knew anything about any turkeys. So that was great. I was just back to being me with an opportunity to reinvent myself. So this is how my rite of passage looked. First, separation from group, I went to the mountain school. A time of being tested, put on turkey duty, learning and growth as a result of the test. For me, what I learned so clearly at that age was that I liked self-indulgence, but I would never be indulgent at the expense of anyone else who needed me. And that's a tremendous thing for a 16-year-old to learn. I learned a ton of other stuff that I can't remember. I don't know how to conjugate French anymore. It's gone. I learned some math. I'm not very good with a compass. I could do it back then, but now I wouldn't trust me. But this lesson, this totally stuck with me, and I don't know that my parents know this. I don't know that I ever told them about turkey duty, and so it was a very private lesson and a very important part of my growing up. I consider it my rite of passage. Okay, so as you think about your child and their experiences with these things, with rites of passage, they're going to screw up, and maybe you'll know about it, and maybe you won't. Often I feel like things are becoming more and more public these days, thanks to social media in large part. We're finding out about when kids screw up. Somebody finds out and tells somebody, and then you know. So I really love the saying, Abraham Maslow, right? Thank you. Who says, if you have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. I'm paraphrasing. But essentially, whatever tool you have and you know how to use, you're going to treat every problem as if you can fix it with that tool. So we as parents need to be really careful about the tools we're using when we discover, if we discover, that our kid is having one of those experiences with failure. Maybe the failure to believe in themselves, maybe the failure to follow the rules, whatever it is. We need to sort of evaluate what tool we are most inclined to reach for first. And you all know these 4 tools that we all reach for when things feel chaotic or pressing or when we're afraid. They are fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, right? So this is an example of how those tools would look if your child were in a crisis of some sort. Let's say that your kid is on the soccer team and you find out that they're being bullied by somebody on the team. So if you reach for fight first, if that's always your instinct to go into fight mode, then you are driving yourself down to practice and you're going to scream at the coach or that kid or that kid's parent when you see them and let them know that that is absolutely not going to happen again, right? If you are flight, then you are on your computer looking up other teams. You're like, maybe I can find a town team. We don't have to play for the school team. I don't want my kid to have to face this anymore. We'll look somewhere else. If you are freeze, that's easy. You're just going to not do anything at all. Not talk about it, not think about it. It'll go away if you just give it a little bit of time. And then if you are fawn, you are baking cookies and you're bringing them to the next game or practice and you're making sure everyone knows these are from Johnny and he just wants you guys to know how much we love being part of the team and we think you're all great. So these 4 tools, you probably have one that you are most likely to reach for, and it probably has served you really well, particularly when you were a child. It was a tool that was very useful to you. But we can sort of become like Maslow and think that's our only tool. So these can all be great tools. Sometimes you need to fight. Sometimes it's helpful to get out of a bad situation. You're going to fly out of it. Sometimes freezing, taking a pause and really thinking before you react is so helpful. And even phoning can have its place, right? They can all be really good, being the peacemaker. But just want you to take a breath before you react and think, what do I really need to be doing that would be most helpful right now, instead of reaching for the same one over and over. And then you get to this 3-step process that will work regardless of the failure experience your child is going through. So that wide variety that we spoke about earlier, they're really different. And the examples in the book go from really subtle experiences to really shocking ones. But this is the same 3-step process, so that makes it easy. The first is contain. And contain means you realize there's a problem, you've got to contain it before it gets bigger. And that can look like containing something that's coming towards your child. So if someone's harassing them online, then you've got to put some technical boundaries around that. Or if your child is making decisions that are putting them in danger, then you may have to contain your kid. So sometimes we have to say, your world is getting really big really quickly, too quickly, and we need to pump the brakes on that, so we're all going to stay in this weekend. We're going to figure out what we're going to do. Okay. So contain means putting a Band-Aid on the problem, or a tourniquet, depending on how bad it is. I find that most parents get there and they are done. They're like, okay, yay, I put a Band-Aid on it, now you go out and play, you stop bleeding, and I will go deal with the 800 other things on my list. It's a totally natural reaction. The most important thing is that you get yourself to resolve, which is the next step. This is where your kid learns to press the button 4 times. You just putting a Band-Aid on it doesn't help your kid develop that grit that they need and that experience with overcoming this bad feeling. The only way, we know this from lots of research, the only way to get over a feeling of helplessness is to take action. And so, in the book, there's a huge menu of things that you can talk to your child about. There are actions they can take when they are having a feeling of failure, or they're facing a setback, they're feeling a challenge, however you want to express it. And so these range, again, in degrees. Some are, maybe your child has done something and they've hurt someone else and they need to give a good apology. The book will tell you how to do that. Or maybe they need to make reparations or make amends. They've done something, they've broken something that belongs to someone, and they need to replace it. So it's more than an apology. Maybe it's more subtle than that, and they just have a misunderstanding of how something works in the world, and they need a little education. So it may just be a conversation that you need to have together. There's a big list in the book of things that your child can do to take action so that they don't develop a feeling of helplessness, which can evolve into a feeling of hopelessness. And all of this has to happen in an environment of no judgment. Just, these things happen, and here's something you can do to move forward and start to make it better, to rebuild trust, whatever needs to happen. And then the first step is mostly yours. The second step is mostly theirs. And the third step is almost entirely yours again. Evolve is when you put this in the rearview mirror and you just stop focusing on it. You have to, at a certain point, see new things in your child. Even if they have made the same mistake 6 times. Even if they didn't feed the turkeys 2 days in a row. You have to decide you're not going to keep pressing on that bruise so that they don't begin to see themselves that way. We don't want any kid in here to say, well, I guess they see me as the loner, I'm the loner. Or they see me as the rebel, I'll keep breaking the rules then, right? So evolve is an opportunity for you to stop pressing on the bruise, stop asking about it, stop pointing it out, and to begin talking about and noticing new things about your child. The 2 archetypes that I find parents struggle with most of all in terms of evolving past it are the loner, the failure to connect with peers, and often parents will keep pressing this bruise without even realizing what they're doing is pressing on it. It's when you say something like, hey, how was school today? Did you talk to Kate? Remember you said that she was kind of nice in your lunch period. Did you get a chance to talk with her or sit next to her? It's this like real need to make sure your kid is okay and that they are connecting with someone, and it can feel to your child like a lot of pressure, like they need to make you happy, like your happiness is resting on their social success, and that can be very hard for them. So at a certain point, you've got to just let them figure that out. And the other one that's really hard for parents to evolve past is the rebel. No, the daredevil. That's the child who fails to take care of their body. So that's, if your child has gotten hurt because they are involved in some degree of risky behavior, it is really hard not to worry about them when they leave your house. But if you are always saying, hey, I don't want to get another phone call like I got that one time, or please be careful and remember, blah, 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 every time they want to leave, they are going to absorb that as how you perceive them, and then they're just going to go, well, that's who I am, right? So at some point, we've got to have some level of confidence, even if they're going to mess up again, even if they're going to make a mistake. That's not to say that if your kid drives without a license, that you're like, okay, have fun tonight. You have to contain that problem. But after you've contained, and after they've done some things to resolve, however long that takes, then you've got to say, now we evolve. Now I'm not going to keep talking about it. Okay. I'm going to leave you with this parting thought, which was quite a surprise to me in researching this book. Of all the families I spoke with, there were 30 that took in the book, I asked them, if I could give you a magic wand and you could erase this failure experience from your child's life, would you? And some of them were extraordinarily painful for the families. And again, some were more so, but still painful enough that they needed to talk about it in the book. I said, would you erase this experience from your child's life? And 29 of them said, I would not. And what they said was, if I could erase it for myself, I would. I don't want to keep thinking about it. But what my child learned from this experience has so much value, I can't take that away from them. So they, all but one, said, I can't. I just want you to tuck that away into your brain or your heart or wherever you need it for the future. And I don't want you to ever say it to your kid, because no one wants to hear, I think you might be happy someday that you're going through this right now. Not that. But it is nice for you to have it in your heart or your brain somewhere, so that when you're going through it, I don't expect you to feel this way when you're going through it at all. But to have some faith that ultimately this is how your child learns to balance, and it's going to be so valuable for them what they get out of this. So that's like a little bit of comfort for me at the end of this. Okay, we are going to go into Q&A. I want to tell you about a couple of ways we can stay connected, or resources that I have. If you are a person who likes to bullet journal, I know a lot of people do, I have a resource on my website that you can print out, and it's a way of interacting with the book, almost like a sort of a self-guided journaling activity you can do while you're reading it. So that's there on my website. This I put up here in case you want to take a picture of it. It's also in the book, but the parents I worked with told me things that other people did for them when they were struggling that really helped them. I don't want my head in the way. Can you see it? Okay, so you can take a picture of that, and those are things that that people said really helped them. And the one that I thought was so meaningful that came up more than once was parents said it helped them when people said, we're not judging you. Like this is very, very normal, and this could be anyone. And I think that's one of the sweetest things you could say. I love your kid. Even when the kid has done something publicly that has been a real screw up. I love your kid. Okay, if you want to stay in touch, I'm on Instagram. It's just my name, and I post there every day, and I sometimes have cute dog photos. Always try to put in good parenting tips that are quick and easy to digest. On the far right is the Facebook group if you want to join. Again, middle and high school parents, and then that's just in the middle of my public Facebook page. I used to get a lot of requests on my private page, so I just put that up there. That's where I am in public on Facebook. Okay, so now, if you have any questions about what you heard, or anything about raising tweens or teens, I'm happy to answer them.
I don't have a tween or teen.
Okay.
I have a 6-year-old.
Yeah.
And he's very, the word is feels so bad about it. He comes home and says, hey, I wasn't playing out. Or he tells me, the teacher.
Yeah.
And then, weeks will go by and we'll come back and say, I still feel bad about that.
Interesting.
And so now I'm having to do it. And then part of me is like, so I love a preacher's kid. So, I have this whole perfectionism thing. So part of me is like, oh my God, did I already do this to him?
Oh.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then I just say to him, I love you. I feel these things too. We already talked about it. We already, I forgave you. It's in the sea of forgetfulness. I really talked about,
Yes.
But what do I do, right? With the kid. And
So that's so,
six,
yeah.
and he keeps,
He's ruminating on it.
yeah.
And I really love everything that you said. This is not a big deal. Modeling, I also make mistakes. Maybe he needs to see, in terms of modeling, what you do when you can't get past feeling bad about something. So that's that second step, resolve. He might need to take some action. Whether that's, why don't you draw a picture of how you can feel better? What is something you could do that would make you feel better? Do you want to give a card to the person you mean to, or do you want to do something nice or something that gives him the feeling of taking an action on it, not just being absolved? So that might make him feel better, and it could be as simple as writing a journal or drawing a picture or just a little creation that makes him feel like, you could bake a muffin and bring it to the person if that makes you feel a little bit better. Could be an opportunity to just really put it behind him. And maybe if you're saying, I forgive you, it's okay, maybe that's not the root of what he's worrying about. Maybe it's his own self or the other person who was involved in another person, the teacher. Is he worried that the teacher's mad at him because he was in time?
Or yesterday, he came and told me that this is what you do. And so I said, perhaps and so what should I say? Well, I don't want to tell you what to say. How do you feel? So we want to go over the road,
Perfect.
I'm sorry, I will do it.
Yeah.
Something to the teacher today. And then now I'm like, okay,
Don't dwell on it, but give him an opportunity to do something.
Yeah.
I think that's great. I hope the letter was well received.
What did you say about
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
a long distance co-parenting, where you're trying to still be able to foster a sense of environments, but it might not always be able to be a consistent sort of back and forth.
Right.
So it's like you can be saying the one thing and trying to have that support, but it's not being able to physically be there.
Right. Right.
Whether it's some kind of
Yeah, it's so hard with co-parenting if you're not on the same page about things like this. There's very little you can do outside of what you can do in your own time and in your own space, and delivering messages, that are about their value and their worth, and that it's okay to make mistakes and that sort of thing. I mean, depending on how old the child is, presumably you can still do that through text or through phone calls and things like that. And also, I don't know how long the distance is, so.
she's more.
Okay, yeah.
It's
So the times apart are big, I would imagine, right? It's not a weekend, yeah, okay. I think you just have to do the sort of pep talk stuff and with your, be sure that you are acting exactly what you're saying, but I know it's so hard because you cannot make your co-parent do what you would like them to do. And fighting over that is only going to add more conflict. So my advice in that situation is just to control what you can control, which is your space and your time. Sorry, that's not a satisfying answer. Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
The last part that you mentioned about what someone asked,
Yeah.
that's something that resonated a lot with me. My young kids, 10, 14, and 16, were not preparing to the U.S. 2 years ago. And so they left all their friends, all their country back home, and it's just an issue that we're always asking. So, are you meeting people? How's it going? And so it resonated because it's putting pressure on them when we really are concerned of how they're doing, and we question. So what would you suggest, I guess each one of our children is very different. One is very social, one is very shy, one is very sporty and is like sports. But so I would imagine that the pressure of the one that's less social is quite hard on him, being asked that often. What would you suggest, I mean, for us as parents, just to back off a bit and not talk about that?
Yeah, I would back off and not talk about it because I'm not sure you're asking the question provides them with any more ability to do better than they're doing, right? It's more just to put your own self at ease. And I'll tell you from my own kid's perspective, my daughter had one friend in high school and was very happy and is a very happy person right now with actually quite a huge friend group. She's 23. And she had one, and she really liked her friend so much, and that was great. My son had a million friends in high school, and it was so much harder for him because he was constantly worrying about which friend he was letting down when he said yes to this friend. Anxiety, deep anxiety over, now these people are going to be mad at me because I'm not going out with them, and my daughter was just like on easy street with her one friend, So sometimes the kids who have a lot of friends have it even harder than the kids who have just a couple niche friends. I think probably the best plan would be to wait a long time. If you get any red flags, then you can bring it up again with a specific child. I would always bring it up individually, not in front of their siblings. So just one-on-one. How are things going? You feel like you're liking the kids at your school? More generalized than are you making friends? You could have a little touch base on that maybe once a month. I think would be okay as long as you're keeping it real high level, not about specific people or not about their performance. Do you know what I mean by that? Like, not are you performing well? Are you making friends? More, what do you think of your school? What are the kids like at your school? Tell me about the different groups. And that would probably give you a lot of insight. Yeah. Yeah.
Can I add something?
Yes, please.
And I don't know if this will work or not, but I frequently moved around a lot, and so this would be the same conversation with my kids too. And one of my who is kind of, she doesn't have a big group of friends here at school, so I was constantly, we did you talk to today? We talked to this group of people. And I heard on a podcast one time, kind of similar, Kelly Gordon says, ask them on a scale of 1 to 10. So
Yeah.
they're forced to keep a number, and then that would spark a conversation. So like my younger one would be like, it was like a 7 today. What made it a 7? You might say, well, this happened in class. Or, well, I went to sit here, and guess what, this person sat next to me, and ended up having a great day. But then I didn't talk to them in the next class. But maybe it was just a 7, to start a conversation. So
I love that.
that sometimes, I've used it with my boys, because sometimes like, to get talking. So that would be, it wasn't every day, it was all the time. But
I'm so happy you said that. And plug for Kelly Corrigan, I was on her
Which
podcast.
is a really good podcast.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions? All right. If you would like to get a book, Acapella Books is over here, and I'm happy to sign it for you. I'll be over there if you want to come over and ask me something. And I think that's it. Thank you so much for coming.